On the surface, have you ever met someone who seems so emotionally aware, so deeply connected to their feelings, that simply standing next to them makes you feel completely seen? That's the nature of a super empath. They experience emotions intensely. They love with their whole heart. But that doesn't mean they're easily fooled.
Now imagine that kind of person becoming involved with someone who is emotionally avoidant, someone who instinctively backs away whenever a relationship begins to feel truly intimate. In the beginning, the avoidant often believes they're the one in control. They appear calm, distant, and difficult to reach. But over time, something quietly changes. Without even realizing it, the super empath begins to challenge the emotional defenses the avoidant depends on to protect their ego. There are 5 subtle signs that show a super empath is quietly breaking down an avoidant's illusion of control, and they never have to raise their voice to do it. The first shift happens when the empath simply stops chasing. This doesn't happen dramatically. There's no big speech or emotional explosion. It's almost invisible, yet its impact is enormous. Avoidants are comfortable with a familiar cycle. They pull away, and someone comes after them. They create distance, and their partner works harder to close it. That pattern gives them the feeling that they control the emotional direction of the relationship. A super empath eventually recognizes this cycle for what it is. At first, they may continue reaching out. They try to understand, offer reassurance, and believe that enough patience can heal the fear hiding behind the avoidance withdrawal. But sooner or later, they realize something important. No amount of love can heal someone who refuses to face their own wounds. A relationship cannot thrive when only one person keeps moving forward. So the empath quietly changes. They stop explaining themselves over and over. They no longer send the first message every time. They stop asking if everything is okay. Instead of fearing silence, they learn to respect it. Their absence isn't loud, it's consistent. And that's exactly what unsettles the avoidant. The empath had become the reliable presence, the person who made them feel understood without constantly asking for the same in return. Then, without anger or resentment, that comforting presence slowly fades away. This isn't about punishment or playing games. It's about choosing self-respect. The empath finally refuses to survive on emotional scraps. They remember their own value, and that single decision completely interrupts the pattern the avoidant relied on for so long. Only then does the avoidant begin to feel the weight of what they've been taking for granted. The confidence that once made them believe they had control starts to crack. Questions begin to surface. Why aren't they reaching out anymore? Did I push them too far? Was I ever as secure as I believed? The silence left behind becomes louder than any conversation. It forces the avoidant to sit with the very emotions they spent years running from: vulnerability, accountability, and the possibility of genuine intimacy. The empath's detachment isn't an act, it's growth. Without saying a word, they're communicating something powerful. I understand what's happening, but I won't keep participating in it. That quiet peace becomes more confronting than any argument ever could. Another sign appears when the super empath begins reflecting the emotional energy they're receiving. They never attack or accuse. They don't demand explanations or criticize the avoidant for being distant. Instead, they naturally become a mirror. If the avoidant becomes emotionally unavailable, the empath stops reaching beyond what's being offered. If communication becomes inconsistent, they no longer exhaust themselves trying to compensate for it. They simply respond with the same level of investment that's being shown. This isn't revenge, it's honesty. Avoidants often depend on emotional imbalance.
They expect the other person to maintain closeness while they control the distance. But once the empath stops carrying that emotional weight alone, the imbalance disappears. The avoidant expects reassurance, comfort, and endless patience. Instead, they find calm neutrality.
That unexpected shift disrupts everything because the emotional safety net is no longer there. The empath doesn't demand change. They don't threaten to leave or issue ultimatums. They simply stop doing all the emotional work by themselves. And somehow, that quiet choice speaks louder than confrontation ever could. Without the empath constantly filling every emotional gap, the avoidant is finally left alone with the emptiness they've been avoiding all along. The mirror isn't meant to copy behavior. It's meant to reveal reality. Down is met with distance. Silence is answered with silence. For perhaps the first time, the avoidant experiences their own emotional pattern from the other side. It feels uncomfortable. They may convince themselves the empath has become cold or distant. But what they're actually noticing is that the person who once softened every difficult moment is no longer protecting them from the consequences of their own emotional walls. The empath isn't trying to fix the relationship anymore. They're allowing it to reveal itself exactly as it is, instead of pretending it's something better. And in that reflection, the avoidant begins to see not only what they've been avoiding, but also what they're truly at risk of losing. That realization makes the cost of emotional unavailability impossible to ignore. A super empath has an incredible ability to hold space for another person. They're comfortable sitting with silence instead of rushing to fill it. They pay attention not only to the words someone speaks, but also to everything left unsaid. Early in a relationship with an avoidant, they often become the emotional foundation, patient, compassionate, and always willing to reach across the distance to create connection. They never force vulnerability. They don't pressure anyone to open up, and they rarely take emotional withdrawal personally. They understand that healing takes time, so they remain hopeful, offering a safe and accepting presence again and again. But even the most patient heart eventually reaches its limit. What sets a super empath apart is that their compassion has healthy limits. They don't keep holding space forever. Eventually, they recognize when their openness is being met with avoidance, emotional resistance, or subtle manipulation. And when that realization comes, everything changes. They don't create a scene. They don't threaten to leave or try to force a reaction. Instead, they make a quiet shift that's impossible to ignore. The biggest change isn't in what they say, it's in the energy they bring. Where they once checked in with, "Are you okay?" they now remain silent. Where they used to initiate every difficult conversation, they step back and wait to see whether the avoidant is willing to meet them halfway. And when silence lingers, they no longer rush to break it. This time, they sit with that silence for themselves. They begin protecting their emotional energy. They realize that constantly making room for someone who refuses to meet them halfway isn't kindness anymore. It's abandoning themselves. When a super empath, after offering endless patience and understanding, finally says, "This relationship no longer works for me," those words carry incredible weight. They're not spoken out of anger. They're not meant to hurt anyone. They're the result of countless moments of reflection, disappointment, and quiet heartbreak. That kind of boundary doesn't invite an argument. It creates emptiness. The avoidant suddenly realizes the emotional support they've quietly depended on is no longer available. The person who was always there to absorb tension, smooth over conflict, and make everything feel safe has stepped back. That absence is deeply unsettling. The avoidant often feels blindsided. After all, they were never pressured or forced into anything.
They were given patience, understanding, and more space than most people would have offered. But the lack of confrontation was never a sign that the empath didn't notice what was happening. It was a sign they were waiting, hoping the avoidant would choose growth on their own. When that growth never comes, the empath finally chooses themselves. That decision isn't surrender.
It's the realization that they can no longer stand alone in a place that was always meant to be shared. And because that choice is made from clarity instead of anger, it shakes the avoidant far more than an emotional outburst ever could. A super empath is naturally wired to feel the pain of others, even when it doesn't belong to them. They're usually the first to ask what's wrong, the first to see fear behind cold behavior, and the first to interpret emotional distance as someone silently struggling instead of someone rejecting them. Because of this, they often show extraordinary patience with an avoidant partner. They absorb emotional tension. They question themselves whenever something feels off. When conflict appears, their first thought is often, "Did I do something wrong?"
Even when they aren't responsible at all. That willingness to carry emotional responsibility unintentionally gives the avoidant an escape. Since avoidants often struggle with emotional discomfort, it's easier for them to deflect, minimize, or suggest that their partner is simply too emotional or asking for too much. In the beginning, the empath believes them. They question their own feelings. They try to become easier to love. They silence their own needs, hoping that if they ask for less, the relationship will finally feel peaceful. But eventually, a pattern becomes impossible to ignore. No matter how calm they are, no matter how patient,
No matter how gently they communicate, somehow the blame always circles back to them. Then one day, everything becomes clear. The empath finally sees the cycle for what it is. The avoidant pulls away. The empath feels confused and hurt. Instead of receiving reassurance or accountability, they're met with silence, excuses, or emotional deflection. And in that moment, something inside them changes forever. They quietly decide they will no longer carry guilt that was never theirs. There's no dramatic confrontation because there doesn't need to be. The change is visible in the way they carry themselves. It's heard in the conversations they no longer chase. It's felt in the calm confidence they bring to situations that once overwhelmed them. When the avoidant says, "You're overreacting," the empath doesn't waste energy defending themselves anymore. They simply recognize that arguing won't create understanding. When conversations are avoided through sarcasm, withdrawal, or emotional shutdown, they stop trying to rescue the moment. Instead, they remind themselves, "This isn't mine to fix." That quiet shift changes everything. The avoidant can no longer redirect responsibility because the empath refuses to pick it up. There are no endless explanations, no desperate attempts to prove their intentions. No more translating hurtful behavior into something acceptable. The empath has stopped making excuses for treatment that slowly drained them. For the avoidant, this feels deeply unsettling because the emotional balance they relied on has disappeared. The person who once absorbed every uncomfortable feeling is no longer carrying that weight. And for the first time, the avoidant is left alone with emotions they've spent so long trying to escape. The person who once softened every difficult moment is no longer there to absorb the impact. The one who constantly tried to understand every silence, every withdrawal, every mixed signal, no longer feels the need to excuse behavior that repeatedly causes pain. By letting go of blame that never belonged to them, the super empath unintentionally forces the avoidant to face something they've spent years avoiding, themselves. Eventually, every super empath reaches a turning point. It isn't dramatic. There are no angry words, emotional ultimatums, or desperate attempts to be heard one last time. It's a calm decision that comes after countless private battles, after endless chances, after believing that enough love and patience would eventually inspire mutual effort. But love alone cannot create willingness. The empath who once carried the emotional weight of the relationship finally decides to put that burden down. Avoidants often become accustomed to people choosing them despite their emotional distance. They grow comfortable believing that the empath will always remain patient, always understand, and always be waiting. What they rarely expect is that the same emotional depth that makes a super empath so compassionate also gives them the wisdom to recognize when their own heart is being neglected. They don't leave to make someone regret losing them. They leave because staying would mean betraying themselves. That decision isn't based on one argument or one disappointing day. It's built from hundreds of small moments. Moments of feeling unheard. Moments of feeling invisible. Moments where their needs were dismissed, minimized, or quietly ignored. Each time the avoidant withdrew, the empath stayed a little longer, believing love could gently invite openness. Eventually, they understand a painful truth. They aren't building a relationship anymore. They're simply waiting inside a cycle that never changes. And once that truth settles in, something inside them becomes incredibly peaceful. The avoidant is often stunned when the empath finally walks away. They wonder, why now? I never told you to leave. But the answer exists in everything the empath no longer feels the need to explain. There are no accusations, no attempts to create guilt, no lengthy speeches. The truth has become simple. Someone who spends their life choosing everyone else eventually discovers there's nothing left for themselves. And when that realization comes, the healthiest choice is to stop trying to earn love from someone who isn't emotionally available to give it. Ironically, this is often the moment the avoidant feels the loss more deeply than ever before. Not because the empath fought harder, not because they demanded change, but because they left quietly, with dignity and self-respect. Their absence says everything their words never could. For the first time, the avoidant realizes the person who always stayed, always reached out, always believed in them, is no longer there. Not because they stopped loving, but because they finally started loving themselves. That quiet decision to value self-respect over endless emotional pursuit can become one of the most confronting experiences an avoidant ever faces. And that's the deeper truth. When a super empath enters the life of an avoidant, the relationship becomes far more than romance. It becomes a mirror, a reflection, a silent invitation to face everything they've hidden behind for years. Not through pressure, not through demands, but through patience, compassion, honesty, and eventually, boundaries that speak louder than words ever could. A super empath never enters a relationship intending to break down someone's ego. That's never their purpose. Yet their emotional awareness, their quiet confidence, and their refusal to abandon themselves eventually expose the illusion of control the avoidant has relied on for so long. The greatest irony is this: the qualities the avoidant once resisted, emotional depth, vulnerability, honesty, genuine closeness, become the very things they miss the most after the empath is gone. The silence left behind becomes its own lesson. The empty space reminds them of the person they believed would always remain, no matter how little they gave in return. To every empath listening, never mistake your kindness for weakness. Your ability to love deeply is one of your greatest strengths. But that strength becomes true power the moment you learn to offer yourself the same loyalty, compassion, and devotion you've always given to everyone else. And to every avoidant who wonders why the loss feels so overwhelming, understand that it isn't only about missing a person.
It's about recognizing that someone was willing to love you wholeheartedly until they realized you weren't willing to meet them in the same place. Thank you for spending this time with Avoidant Heart and for being willing to look inward. Whether you recognized yourself in the empath, the avoidant, or somewhere in between, real growth always begins with honest self-awareness. If you're here, you've already taken the first step. Until next time, protect your peace, respect your boundaries, and remember that genuine connection only becomes possible when we stop hiding from ourselves and start showing up with honesty. Take care, and I'll see you in the next one.